The massive ships appeared without warning on a clear Tuesday morning, materializing in Earth's atmosphere through what scientists would later call dimensional folding. One moment the skies were empty. The next, kilometer-long crystalline structures hovered over major cities worldwide, their surfaces reflecting sunlight in hypnotic, impossible patterns. Dr. Elena Shepard had been recording birdsong in Central Park when the sky darkened. The robin she'd been observing went silent mid-chirp. Looking up, she saw people pointing, screaming, running, but Elena stood transfixed. The ship above Manhattan emitted patterns of light that shifted and pulsed in sequences that struck her as oddly grammatical. "It's language," she whispered, fumbling for her recorder. As a xenolinguist at MIT specializing in non-human communication systems, she'd spent her career preparing for a moment that most colleagues considered purely theoretical. 3 miles away, the United Nations Security Council gathered in emergency session. Military commanders reported that jets scrambled to intercept the vessels had experienced complete systems failure within a kilometer of approach. Nuclear deterrence protocols have been activated globally, but every silo, submarine and mobile launcher reported identical malfunctions. The Vraxians, as they would later introduce themselves, made no hostile moves during those first 6 hours. They simply hovered, broadcasting patterns of light and sound that human technology struggled to fully capture. At dusk, they finally descended. Elena had been escorted to a hastily established government facility in Midtown, where she joined dozens of linguists, mathematicians, and cryptographers analyzing the transmissions. She alone had identified structural patterns similar to mathematical proofs in the light sequences. "They're not just communicating," she told the stone-faced military officials. "They're explaining something fundamental about how they think." The first Vraxian to set foot on Earth emerged in Central Park. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, its body appeared composed of interlocking crystalline segments that shimmered with internal light. Where a human would have a face, this beam displayed a smooth surface that rippled with colors like oil on water. When it spoke, through what seemed to be vibrations rather than sound, Elena felt the meaning resonate directly in her mind. "We bring knowledge. We bring purpose. We bring completion." Within 48 hours, similar beings had established footholds in 37 major cities. Their technology neutralized military resistance with embarrassing ease. Weapons simply stopped functioning. Vehicles froze. Communications went silent. 1 week after their arrival, world governments capitulated one by one. The Vraxians established processing centers in each occupied city, broadcasting messages of cooperation and advancement. Humans were encouraged to register for assessment to determine their optimal function in the new order. Elena, using her credentials, gained access to a processing center established in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Posing as a volunteer translator, she accessed their communication hub and discovered the horrifying truth embedded in their internal communications. The elegant light patterns contained discussions of humans as mere fauna to be cataloged, while they strip-mined Earth's unique mineral deposits and harvested its biosphere. Humans were classified as semi-sentient indigenous organisms, not worthy of negotiation, merely management during resource extraction. As Elena downloaded what data she could onto a modified flash drive, a Vraxian approached. Its crystalline face reflected no emotion as it tilted its head, studying her with what seemed like curiosity. "You comprehend our patterns," it stated. "Not a question." "I'm learning," Elena replied, forcing a smile. "Interesting. Unexpected capability in semi-sentient organism." The Vraxian reached toward her with a crystalline appendage. Elena backed away, accidentally knocking over a display terminal. In the momentary confusion, she slipped past the alien and fled through an emergency exit. Outside, she witnessed thousands of humans being scanned and categorized like specimens, their faces blank with artificial calm induced by the pulsing lights overhead. And in that moment, watching the methodical processing of humanity, Elena understood that resistance would require something beyond conventional warfare. It would require understanding an intelligence so fundamentally different from our own that it might as well be from another universe entirely. 3 months into the occupation, Alina found herself hunched over a ham radio in the basement of a dilapidated Brooklyn brownstone. The building's exterior was deliberately unmaintained, broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, precisely the kind of structure the Vraxians deemed uninhabitable for semi-sentient organisms, and therefore rarely patrolled. "Lighthouse to waypoint, do you copy?" she whispered into the microphone. Static crackled, then a deep voice responded, "Waypoint receiving. Proceed." The sequence works. Cognitive disruption confirmed in 3 targets. The voice belonged to Marcus Chen, former Army Ranger who'd watched his entire unit disintegrate when they'd attempted to breach a Vraxian command post during the first week of invasion. Now he led one of the few effective resistance cells operating in the New York zone. "Explain disruption again," Marcus said, his skepticism evident even through the radio's poor audio quality. "When I recited the specific nursery rhymes, the ones with logical inconsistencies, the patrol units exhibited temporary processing delays. One actually seized up completely for 12 seconds. "Nursery rhymes," Marcus repeated flatly. "We're fighting advanced aliens with hey diddle diddle, the cat, and the fiddle." "Not just any rhymes," Alina corrected. "Only the ones containing impossible scenarios. Dishes running away with spoons. Cows jumping over moons. Things that cannot exist in a logical framework." Their unlikely partnership had begun 6 weeks earlier when Alina, fleeing from a processing sweep, had literally stumbled into Marcus's hideout. Initially, he'd nearly thrown her out, until she demonstrated how the Vraxians' communication systems faltered when exposed to certain human cultural elements. Above them, the floorboards creaked as Mylin, a former linguistics graduate student who'd been studying under Alina before the invasion, entered with their newest recruit. "Dr. Shepard," Mylin called down. "She's here." The basement door opened, revealing a slight girl with electric blue hair partially concealed under a woolen cap. At 17, Zoe Williams looked younger than her age, a fact that had allowed her to move through occupied zones with relative freedom, as the Vraxians considered adolescents incomplete organisms and subjected them to less scrutiny. "You the language lady?" Zoe asked, eyes darting nervously around the basement. Alina nodded. "And you're the one who disrupted the containment field." 2 days earlier, Zoe had accidentally discovered she could momentarily disrupt Vraxian security fields by broadcasting specific radio frequencies from her modified ham radio set. The discovery had saved her mother from capture during a processing sweep, but put them both on the aliens' priority target list. "It wasn't that big a deal," Zoe shrugged. "I was just trying to boost my signal to reach my friend in Queens when the field went all wonky." Marcus stepped from the shadows. "Show us exactly what you did." As Zoe demonstrated her makeshift equipment, Alina noticed something remarkable. The girl had unknowingly created a broadcast pattern that mimicked human laughter, something the Vraxians' communication system apparently interpreted as data corruption. "Their language is perfect," Alina explained. "Excitement building. No ambiguity, no homonyms, no jokes. It's pure information transfer, but human communication is messy, contradictory, and layered with meaning. When we feed their system something paradoxical, it glitches out," Zoe finished, a slow smile spreading across her face, "like trying to divide by 0. Marcus remained unconvinced. "Even if this works, we're just annoying them. We need to extract Dr. Karim from the Manhattan Processing Center if we want any real chance at understanding the enemy." Alina and Zoe exchanged glances. Dr. Jamal Karim was the country's foremost cognitive scientist, rumored to be helping the Vraxians map human brain patterns for more efficient processing. If anyone could help them understand the aliens' consciousness, it would be him. "I think," Alina said slowly, "we might have just found our way in. We don't need weapons to infiltrate the center." She pointed to Zoe's equipment. "We need noise, the right kind of noise." As they began planning the extraction, None of them realize they were about to discover the Vraxians' most unexpected weakness, their fundamental inability to comprehend the concept of fiction. For a species evolved with perfect collective memory and communication, the human capacity for deliberate falsehood was not just foreign, it was cognitively impossible. The extraction of Dr. Jamal Karim from the Manhattan Processing Center succeeded beyond expectations and failed catastrophically at the same time. Elena, concealed behind a Vraxian translation terminal, broadcast carefully selected nursery rhymes and logical paradoxes through the facility's communication system. As predicted, the crystalline guards experienced processing delays, their internal lights flickering erratically as they attempted to resolve the unresolvable contradictions. Marcus led a 4-person team through the temporarily unmonitored corridors to the research wing. They found Dr. Karim hunched over complex equipment, surrounded by brain scans and neural mapping displays. "Dr. Karim," Marcus whispered, "we're getting you out." The cognitive scientist didn't look up. "I've discovered something extraordinary. They cannot lie. Cannot even conceptualize deception. Save it for the debrief. We have 3 minutes before systems reset." Outside, Zoe maintained her broadcast from a modified delivery van, sweat beading on her forehead as she constantly adjusted frequencies to counter the Vraxians' adaptive systems. 2 blocks away, a diversion team led by Mylin created a secondary distraction by broadcasting contradictory mathematical equations near a patrol route. The extraction proceeded smoothly until the final checkpoint. A damaged Vraxian scout, its crystalline form cracked along one side, stumbled into their path. Unlike its brethren, this one appeared partially immune to the paradox broadcast, its movements erratic but purposeful. The alien's damaged state presented an unprecedented opportunity. "Take it," Dr. Karim urged. "A live specimen could accelerate our understanding exponentially." Marcus hesitated. Capturing the alien meant abandoning their clean escape route through the subway tunnels. They'd need to improvise, risking exposure in surface streets monitored by Vraxian drones. "The Alvarez family is providing our secondary extraction," he said quietly. "If we take this route, they'll be exposed." Elena, monitoring through comms, heard the impossible choice. The Alvarez family, parents with 3 young children, had risked everything to provide a safe house near the processing center. "Marcus," she began. "Decision made." He cut her off. Turning to his team, he ordered, "Contain the scout. We're taking it with us." The resistance fighters deployed a portable Faraday cage, modified with the frequency disruptors they'd developed from Zoe's discovery. The damaged Vraxian, attempting to broadcast a distress signal, found itself trapped in an electromagnetic prison that scattered its communications into gibberish. The team diverted to the surface streets, hauling their alien prisoner and Dr. Karim toward the Alvarez safe house. They arrived just as a Vraxian patrol ship detected the electromagnetic anomaly of their containment device. "Get inside now," Marcus ordered. Dr. Karim and the contained Vraxian were rushed into the basement while Marcus made the call he'd been dreading. "Alvarez family, Protocol Omega. Repeat, Protocol Omega." Within 60 seconds, the family of 5 had grabbed pre-packed emergency bags and escaped through a concealed tunnel that led to the sewers, their home and identities abandoned forever. Marcus watched from the window as the patrol ship descended. He'd made the right tactical choice, but the cost weighed heavily. Another family displaced, more children who would grow up in the shadows. In the basement, Dr. Karim began immediate analysis of the captured Vraxian. The alien's damaged state allowed them to observe reactions without the full cognitive defensive measures of healthy specimens. "Fascinating," Karim murmured. "Its neural pathways are attempting to repair themselves, but the damage has isolated this individual from the collective consciousness." Elena entered cautiously. "Can it understand us?" "I believe so, but not like we understand each other. It processes information perfectly, without interpretation or contextual filters." She approached the containment field, studying the crystalline being whose internal lights pulsed in increasingly agitated patterns. Making a decision, she spoke directly to it. This statement is false. The simplest paradox in human logic, a self-referential contradiction impossible to resolve as either true or false. The effect was immediate and visible. The Vraxian's internal lights flickered chaotically, its crystalline form vibrating as if under physical stress. Again, Dr. Karim urged, adjusting sensors to record the reaction. Elena leaned closer to the containment field. I am lying right now. The Vraxian's vibrations intensified, producing a high-pitched whine that made everyone wince. A thin crack appeared along its crystalline surface. Its consciousness operates on perfect logical consistency, Karim said, excitement evident in his voice. Paradoxes aren't just confusing to them. They're physically damaging. As the implications sank in, Elena's communicator crackled with Zoe's voice. We've got a problem. Big problem. The Vraxians are accelerating their timetable. Mass processing of major population centers begins next week. Their theoretical discovery had suddenly become a desperate race against extinction. It's not enough to affect a few individuals, Dr. Karim insisted, pacing the underground command center that had once been a subway maintenance tunnel. We need to target their collective consciousness simultaneously. 6 days had passed since they'd captured the Vraxian scout. 6 days of experimentation, analysis, and frantic communication with resistance cells worldwide. The countdown to mass processing continued relentlessly. Elena studied the global map projected on the wall, red dots indicating confirmed resistance groups across 6 continents. The theory is sound. Human consciousness evolved to handle contradictions. We live with them daily. Their consciousness evolved for perfect information processing. The question is scale. Marcus entered, followed by Zoe, whose expertise with communication systems had made her irreplaceable despite her age. Tokyo is online, he announced. Cairo, Sao Paulo, and Sydney too. We're still waiting on Moscow and Berlin. Operation Paradox, their desperate attempt to weaponize human contradiction, would require simultaneous action worldwide to have any chance of meaningful impact. The broadcast package is ready, Zoe said, holding up a data drive. Nested paradoxes, optical illusions, impossible geometries, and mathematical contradictions, all formatted to penetrate their communication frequencies. Will it work through their shields? Elena asked. Zoe's confidence faltered. Maybe. Theoretically. Their adaptive systems have been countering our previous attempts more quickly each time. Then we need a delivery system they won't expect, Marcus said. He unrolled blueprint schematics across the central table. The Vraxians have established resonance towers in every occupied city, structures that amplify their communications. If we can piggyback our signal through those towers. Dr. Karim looked skeptical. The towers are heavily guarded. Not all of them. Marcus pointed to locations marked on the blueprint. They've automated smaller relay nodes in areas they consider low priority. Minimal sentient oversight. Elena understood immediately. We hijack the nodes, secure brief access to their network, and deliver a system-wide cognitive attack. Marcus finished. The plan crystallized rapidly. 12 hours later, strike teams were in position near relay nodes in 27 cities globally. Each carried identical broadcast packages and timing protocols. In New York, Marcus led the primary team, with Elena providing real-time analysis of Vraxian communications and Zoe handling technical interface. Dr. Karim remained at the command center, monitoring the captured scout for control comparison. Remember, Elena's voice came through their earpieces as they approached the Queen's relay node. We need 14 seconds of clean broadcast to penetrate their filtering systems. Any less, and the effect will be localized and temporary. The node stood atop an abandoned water tower, its crystalline structure pulsing with internal light patterns. 2 automated sentries, smaller Vraxians programmed for security functions, patrolled the perimeter. Zoe activated her customized disruptor, broadcasting a specific frequency that had proven effective against automated units. The sentries paused mid-patrol, their internal lights flickering as they processed the contradictory inputs. "Now," Marcus ordered. The team moved with practiced efficiency. 2 members secured the perimeter while Zoe and Marcus ascended the water tower. At the base of the node, Zoe connected her interface device to the crystalline structure, her fingers flying across the adapted keyboard. "I'm in their subnet," she reported. "Beginning package upload." Across the globe, identical scenes played out with varying degrees of success. In Tokyo, resistance fighters deployed optical illusions that disoriented Vraxian guards. In Cairo, mathematicians broadcast unsolvable equations on the aliens' command frequencies. In Rio, musicians played impossible time signatures through modified sound equipment. "Upload at 60%, Zoe reported. "Something's wrong. They're detecting the intrusion." Elena's voice came through with urgency. "The collective is responding. Adaptive measures initiating." 70%. Zoe continued, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool night air. "Icky." The node above them began to pulse erratically, its crystal structure emitting a high-pitched whine. "They're trying to sever the connection," Elena warned. "Hurry." 95%. Done. Zoe disconnected her device just as the node flared with blinding light. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, across the cityscape, Vraxian structures simultaneously emitted discordant pulses of light, patterns that broke fundamental rules of their communication system. "It's working," Elena breathed. Everywhere they looked, Vraxian units froze in place, their internal lights flickering chaotically. Patrol ships hovering above Manhattan tilted dangerously, some colliding in bursts of crystalline fragments. Marcus held Zoe down from the water tower as the team retreated to their extraction point. "Did we stop them?" he asked. Elena's voice came through, tempered with caution. "Not stopped. Disrupted. Temporarily. But now we know it's possible." As they escaped through the darkened streets, they passed a Vraxian commander, one of the highest-ranking aliens they'd ever seen this close. It stood motionless, its crystalline form vibrating subtly, internal lights pulsing in disjointed patterns. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had landed a meaningful blow against their seemingly invincible occupiers. But the Vraxians' response would be swift and terrible. The Vraxian response came 3 days after Operation Paradox, not with the expected brutality, but with something more disturbing: withdrawal. Across occupied territories, the aliens retreated from direct interaction with humans. Processing centers continued to operate, but now used automated systems rather than sentient Vraxian overseers. Patrol patterns became randomized, communication broadcasts more encrypted. "They're adapting," Dr. Karim observed, reviewing data from global monitoring stations, minimizing their exposure to human cognitive patterns. The Resistance Command Center had relocated to an abandoned subway platform beneath the Natural History Museum after their previous location was compromised. Elena studied their captive Vraxian, which had deteriorated noticeably since Operation Paradox. Its once brilliant internal lights now pulsed weakly, and fissures had spread across its crystalline surface. "The damage is accelerating," she noted. "Each paradox we introduce compounds the effect." Marcus entered, accompanied by a woman Elena didn't recognize, tall, angular, with steel-gray hair cropped short. "Dr. Hannah O'Neill," Marcus introduced her, philosophy professor from Sydney. "She has news." The professor wasted no time with pleasantries. "We've confirmed a dissolution event. Complete molecular breakdown of a Vraxian commander." A hushed silence fell over the command center. "How?" Elena finally asked. "I was captured during a sweep of the university," O'Neill explained. "They brought me before a commander for interrogation about resistance activities. Instead of answering their questions, I recited a series of philosophical paradoxes I've studied for decades: the liar paradox, Russell's barber, the omnipotence paradox, delivered in rapid succession. She displayed footage on her tablet, smuggled out by resistance members who had infiltrated Sydney's security systems. The video showed O'Neill calmly speaking to a towering Vraxian. As she continued her recitation, the alien's internal lights began to flicker erratically. After approximately 40 seconds, the crystalline being vibrated violently, then shattered into dust, leaving nothing but a pile of inert particles on the floor. Total cellular dissolution, Dr. Karim breathed, studying the footage. The paradoxes didn't just confuse it, they fundamentally destabilized its physical structure. Why this one? Marcus demanded. We've bombarded them with paradoxes before without this result. Dr. O'Neill considered. I believe it was the compounding effect. Each paradox I presented built upon the previous one, creating logical loops with no resolution path. For a consciousness evolved around perfect information processing. It was like dividing by zero in every cognitive subroutine simultaneously. Elena finished. Zoe burst into the command center, her face flushed with urgency. The Vraxians are evacuating the Brooklyn Processing Center. They're moving all human subjects to Manhattan. Consolidation, Marcus realized. They're creating a buffer zone between their command structures and potential resistance cells. Elena turned to Dr. O'Neill. We need to document exactly which paradoxes you used, in what order, with what delivery cadence, if we can weaponize this effect. An alarm blared through the command center. Their perimeter sensors had detected movement. Vraxian patrol, the security officer reported. 12 units, approaching from the south entrance. They've tracked Dr. O'Neill. Marcus concluded grimly. Evacuation protocol Alpha. Everyone to secondary locations. As the command center erupted into disciplined chaos, Dr. Karim collapsed suddenly, clutching his chest. Elena rushed to his side. Stress-induced cardiac event. The medical officer diagnosed after a quick examination. He needs immediate care. The timing couldn't have been worse. Dr. Karim's expertise was irreplaceable, especially now that they'd discovered a means to potentially eliminate the Vraxians permanently. Get him to the medical bunker, Elena ordered, making a split-second decision. I'll take over the research. Marcus looked at her sharply. You're a linguist, not a cognitive scientist. I'm the best option we have right now, she responded firmly. And I've worked alongside Jamal for months. I understand his methods. As they evacuated, Zoe paused at Elena's side. The captive Vraxian. What about it? Elena glanced at the deteriorating alien, its once perfect crystalline form now riddled with cracks. Bring it. We're not done learning from it yet. Outside, they could hear the distinctive humming of Vraxian patrol units drawing closer. The team split into predetermined evacuation groups, scattering through the subway tunnels in different directions. Elena found herself thrust into a leadership role she never wanted, carrying the burden of humanity's most promising weapon against the invaders. But as she helped transport the contained Vraxian through the darkness of the tunnels, she couldn't shake a troubling thought. If paradoxes could destroy these beings so completely, what happened to the information they contained? And more disturbingly, where did they go when they ceased to exist? You're going to what? Marcus stared at Elena, disbelief evident in his expression. Their new command center, a repurposed maintenance level beneath Grand Central Station, hummed with activity as resistance members prepared for their most ambitious operation yet. I'm going to attempt direct communication with the captive, Elena repeated. Its isolation from the collective has continued for weeks now. The degradation pattern suggests it's developing something analogous to individuality. The captive Vraxian floated in a modified containment field, its once perfect crystalline form now asymmetrical, riddled with fractures. Its internal lights no longer pulsed in the precise patterns characteristic of its species, instead flickering in unpredictable sequences. And if it dissolves like the commander in Sydney? Marcus challenged. Then we learn something valuable about dissolution triggers, Elena countered. But I don't think it will. This specimen has been exposed to human paradoxes for an extended period. It's adapting. Dr. O'Neill, who had joined their cell permanently after the Sydney incident, studied the containment readings. Fascinating. Its neural pathways are reconfiguring, almost as if it's developing cognitive partitioning to isolate contradictory information. Zoe looked up from her workstation, where she'd been developing what she called paradox bombs, devices designed to broadcast precisely calibrated sequences of contradictions directly into Vraxian communication networks. Like how we compartmentalize, she asked, how we can hold contradictory beliefs without short-circuiting. Precisely, Alina nodded. And I want to know if it's becoming capable of understanding fiction, the concept of deliberate falsehood without deceptive intent. Marcus remained skeptical, but recognized the potential value. You have 15 minutes, not 1 second more. Alina approached the containment field, activating a modified communication interface. The Vraxian oriented toward her, its movements distinctly different from the fluid precision typical of its kind. I will tell you a story. Alina began carefully. A sequence of events that did not occur in physical reality but exist as information. This is called fiction. The alien's lights pulsed rapidly, but it remained intact. No signs of the dissolution response they'd observed previously. 3 bears lived in a forest house. A girl with golden hair entered without permission. She sat in their chairs, ate their food, slept in their beds. The Vraxian tilted what passed for its head, internal lights shifting to an unfamiliar pattern. This did not happen, it responded, the translation system rendering its vibrations into halting English. Correct. It is fiction. Not truth, not lie. A different category. The alien's lights dimmed momentarily, then intensified. Purpose. To communicate ideas, to explore possibilities, to understand ourselves. A prolonged silence followed as the Vraxian processed this concept so fundamentally alien to its species' perfect information system. Inefficient, dangerous, it finally responded. Creates uncertainty. Yes, Alina agreed. And that's our strength. Across the room, Zoe suddenly called out. We've got movement. Massive energy signatures at all major Vraxian hubs. Resistance analysts worldwide had been monitoring the invaders' activities since the Sydney dissolution. Something significant was happening. They're constructing something, Marcus said, studying the incoming data. Energy collectors of unprecedented scale. Dr. O'Neill analyzed the schematics being transmitted from observation posts. If these readings are correct, they're building devices capable of harvesting atmospheric ionization on a planetary scale. Which means what, exactly? Marcus demanded. Which means they could strip Earth's upper atmosphere of its electromagnetic properties, Alina realized, the implication striking her with horrifying clarity. Render the planet uninhabitable while extracting massive energy resources. Time frame? Marcus asked tersely. At current construction rates, 6 weeks maximum. The captive Vraxian's lights pulsed rapidly, drawing Alina's attention back to the containment field. Evacuation protocol, it stated. Standard procedure when indigenous resistance exceeds acceptable parameters. They're not leaving because we're winning, Alina translated for the others. They're leaving because we're not worth the continued effort. They'll just take what they want and render Earth uninhabitable in the process. Marcus's expression hardened. Then we accelerate our timetable. Zoe, are the paradox bombs deployable? 5 units ready, 20 more in production. We need hundreds, Alina said. And we need a delivery system that can penetrate their command centers directly. I think I can help with that, came a weak voice from the doorway. Dr. Karim stood there, pale but upright, supported by a medical technician. His recovery had been faster than anyone expected. Jamal. Alina moved to assist him to a chair. You should be resting. No time for rest, he replied grimly. I've been analyzing the Sydney footage. The dissolution wasn't just caused by paradoxes. It was caused by a specific type of recursive self-referential contradiction, delivered in a precise neurological sequence. He pulled a tablet from his pocket, displaying a complex formula. This is the dissolution key. the perfect sequence to disrupt their collective consciousness permanently. The Resistance now had both a weapon and a target. The only question was whether they could deploy it in time to prevent Earth's atmosphere from being stripped away, and whether they were prepared for the moral implications of potentially exterminating an entire species. As if reading her thoughts, the captive Vraxian's lights pulsed once in a pattern Elena had never seen before. "What did it say?" Marcus asked. Elena hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure. The closest translation would be fear." 14 months after the invasion began, the Vraxian command structure imploded with a suddenness that surprised even the Resistance leadership. Elena stood on the roof of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, watching Vraxian ships moving erratically across the Manhattan skyline. Some ascended into the upper atmosphere at dangerous velocities, while others hovered motionless, their once perfect crystalline structures now asymmetrical and dull. "It's happening everywhere," Marcus said, joining her with a tablet displaying global reports. Sydney, Tokyo, London, Moscow. Their coordination has completely broken down. The mass deployment of paradox bombs, devices broadcasting Dr. Karim's precisely calibrated dissolution sequences, had begun 3 days earlier. Resistance cells worldwide had targeted Vraxian communication nodes simultaneously, overwhelming their adaptive defenses through sheer volume. Dr. Karim's sequence wasn't just effective, Elena observed. It's self-perpetuating within their network. They can't purge it without severing their collective consciousness entirely. Below them, a lone Vraxian wandered Central Park's empty expanse, its movements lacking the precise efficiency that had characterized the invaders. Its internal lights flickered in chaotic patterns that bore no resemblance to their original communication system. "Look at that one," Elena pointed. "It's completely disconnected from the collective." Marcus raised his rifle, but Elena placed her hand on the barrel. "No, I need to try something." Before he could object, she was descending the maintenance ladder to the museum's rear entrance. Minutes later, she approached the solitary alien across the park's open field, moving slowly, hands visible. The Vraxian oriented toward her, but made no aggressive move. Up close, Elena could see extensive fracturing throughout its crystalline form, internal lights pulsing irregularly. "Can you understand me?" she asked. The alien's lights shifted in what appeared to be an attempt at communication. The pattern was not standard Vraxian language, but something improvised, broken. Alone, it finally vibrated in approximated English. "I. Alone." Elena felt a chill. "Yes, separated from your collective. Others, dissolving. Network, corrupted. Its lights dimmed momentarily. I, changing. You're developing individuality." Elena realized aloud. A separate consciousness. Painful. Chaotic. The Vraxian's form trembled. How? Function. With contradiction. Elena considered how to explain something humans took for granted. We compartmentalize. We accept that reality contains paradoxes and contradictions. The alien's lights pulse erratically. Purpose of fiction, now understand. Training for contradictory reality. A distant explosion drew their attention skyward. A Vraxian ship had collided with one of their atmospheric harvesters, both shattering in a cascade of crystalline fragments that rained down over the Hudson River. "Your people are trying to evacuate," Elena said. "Not people. Collective." The Vraxian's vibrations took on a different harmonic. Was collective. Now. Fragments. From her earpiece, Marcus's voice came urgently. "Elena, get back here. Something's happening with our captive." At the command center, Elena found a scene of controlled chaos. The captive Vraxian's containment field flickered as the being inside underwent dramatic transformation. Its crystalline structure was reconfiguring, internal lights organizing into new patterns. "It's stabilizing," Dr. O'Neill observed with astonishment. "Creating new neural pathways that can process contradictions without cascade failure." Dr. Karim, monitoring the physiological changes, looked up with wonder. "It's evolving." adapting to accommodate paradox by developing a more complex consciousness. Is this happening to all of them? Marcus demanded. No, Alina said with certainty. Most are too deeply integrated into the collective. They can't adapt quickly enough. This one has had months of isolation and gradual exposure. Zoe burst into the command center. Global report incoming. Vraxian dissolution events accelerating exponentially. 80% of their command structure is gone. Alina turned to the captive, whose transformation continued. Why can't the others adapt like you? Its response came with new clarity. Collective cannot hold contradiction. Individuals might. Too late. Dissolution, cascading through network. Cannot stop. On the monitors, they watched as Vraxian ships worldwide attempted emergency dimensional folding, their method of interstellar travel. Most failed catastrophically, their navigation systems corrupted by the paradox infection spreading through their collective consciousness. They're trying to escape back to their origin point, Dr. Karim noted. With corrupted navigation systems, Alina added grimly. That's essentially suicide. The largest Vraxian carrier, hovering above what had once been the UN headquarters, began the dimensional folding process. Energy built around its crystalline form, distorting space-time visibly. Then, instead of cleanly transitioning, it imploded with catastrophic force, collapsing inward before releasing a silent pulse of energy that momentarily illuminated the entire city. One by one, the remaining ships attempted similar escapes. Some succeeded, vanishing from Earth's atmosphere. Most failed, dissolving into cascades of inert crystalline dust. In the containment field, their captive Vraxian watched the destruction of its species with newly evolved awareness. What will you do now? Alina asked it. Its lights pulsed in a pattern that matched the cadence of human speech, an unprecedented adaptation. Learn to be individual. Learn fiction. Learn humanity. As night fell over New York, the last Vraxian ships attempted evacuation. By morning, not a single functioning alien structure remained active on Earth's surface. Only scattered crystalline dust, already beginning to lose its reactive properties, gave evidence they had ever existed. Humanity had prevailed not through military might, but through the very aspects of consciousness the Vraxians had considered primitive. Our capacity for contradiction, for fiction, for paradox. Our greatest weakness had proven our salvation. 3 years after the last Vraxian ship attempted evacuation, humanity had reclaimed its world. Cities were rebuilt, governments reconstituted, and the scars of occupation began to heal. Helena stood in what had once been the Vraxian Central Command Post, now transformed into the Earth Sinological Research Institute. Around her, scientists from dozens of countries worked to understand the technology left behind by the vanished invaders. The final decryption sequence is complete, announced Dr. Karim, who had fully recovered and now headed the Institute's Cognitive Sciences Division. We've accessed their central database. The holographic display activated, filling the chamber with streams of crystalline data structures. Years of work had finally yielded access to the Vraxians' complete records, their history, their knowledge, their purpose. It's more than we imagined, Alina breathed, watching the vast repository of information unfold before them. Marcus, now serving as security director for the Institute, studied the display with practiced wariness. What are we looking at exactly? Dr. O'Neill, who had developed a specialized interface to navigate the alien database, highlighted a specific data cluster. Their historical archives, records of every civilization they encountered before Earth. The display reconfigured to show 17 distinct planetary systems, each with detailed biological and technological assessments of the indigenous species. 17 advanced civilizations, Alina realized, her voice hushed. All technologically superior to Earth when the Vraxians arrived. Dr. Karim expanded one record after another. The Centaurian Coalition, fusion technology, interplanetary colonization, the Protean hegemony, quantum computing, artificial gravity manipulation, the Tau Ceti Federation, biological immortality, consciousness transfer. And all 17 surrendered without significant resistance, Marcus noted, scanning the tactical assessments. Because none of them had our specific cognitive architecture, Elena explained, the pieces finally fitting together. They were all logical, consistent, efficient. Everything the Vraxians valued. Their perfect information processing made them vulnerable to the same dissolution effect. In a specially designed habitat across the facility, 7, as they had named the transformed Vraxian who had chosen to remain on Earth, interfaced with the database directly. 3 years of evolution had changed the once crystalline being into something unprecedented, a hybrid consciousness that combined Vraxian perfect recall with human cognitive flexibility. Confirmation, 7 announced, its voice now produced through a synthesizer that approximated human speech patterns. Earth was unique in the Vraxian catalog. The only species whose cognitive architecture proved resistant to assimilation. Elena approached the habitat's transparent barrier. Because our primitive consciousness, our ability to embrace contradiction, to find meaning in absurdity, to thrive amid cognitive dissonance, was actually our greatest strength. Not primitive, 7 corrected. Complex. Adaptable. The collective could not comprehend how beings could function while holding mutually exclusive concepts simultaneously. This is still difficult for me. Marcus joined them, studying the being that had once been their captive. You've come a long way from trying to dissolve when I told you the liar paradox. I am individual now, 7 responded. Learning to appreciate fiction. Yesterday I experienced humor. It was unsettling. A young technician rushed into the room, tablet in hand. Dr. Shepard, the Deep Space Array has detected something. Elena took the tablet, studying the readings with growing amazement. A signal, directed specifically at Earth. Origin, Marcus asked, immediately alert. The Pleiades cluster, specifically targeting us, using modified Vraxian communication protocols. The entire research team gathered as Elena transferred the data to the main display. The signal contained complex light patterns similar to Vraxian communication, but structured differently, more fluid, less rigidly perfect. Another species intercepted the Vraxians' final transmission, Dr. Karim realized. They know what happened here. Elena felt a chill. Would this be another invasion? Had they simply exchanged one threat for another? 7 studied the signal patterns, head tilted in concentration. Not Vraxian. Similar technological base, different cognitive structure. The signal contains deliberate paradoxes. What? Elena looked at the patterns again, suddenly recognizing the embedded contradictions. Mathematical formulas with impossible solutions, linguistic structures that looped back on themselves. They're showing us they understand paradox, she translated in wonder. It's a demonstration of cognitive compatibility. The signal concluded with a simple message, rendered in basic mathematical principles that translated easily across species barriers. We understand paradox. We seek exchange, not conquest. 6 months later, humanity prepared for another first contact. This time, they did so not with fear, but with the confidence of a species that had discovered its most peculiar cognitive traits were actually its greatest strength. Elena, selected to lead the diplomatic team, stood at the newly constructed reception facility as the alien ship appeared on the horizon. Sleek, organic, entirely unlike the crystalline Vraxian vessels. "Are you afraid?" Marcus asked quietly, standing at her side. Elena smiled, watching humanity's future approach. "Of course," she replied. "And also not at all." As the ship landed and its occupants emerged, flowing, iridescent beings with aspects reminiscent of both solid matter and pure energy, the lead alien registered Elena's perfect human contradiction. "We too," it communicated in a harmonic that resonated with meaning, "exist in many states simultaneously. We have much to discuss." And with that simple exchange, Humanity entered the galactic community not as conquered primitives, but as equals valued for the very qualities that once seemed to be our limitations. Our capacity for paradox had become our passport to the stars.